Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something really fundamental, empathy.
Right. How we connect, how we understand each other. It seems simple, but it's not.
Exactly. We've gathered a whole lot of different perspectives, research, the usual deep dive material, and maybe more importantly, why you should care about it.
Because understanding this can genuinely change how you interact with people, how you see the world.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The big question, what is empathy? Because it feels like everyone uses the word but.
But the definitions are all over the place. Yeah, it's fascinating. It's not just one thing.
Like Daniel Batson keeps it short. A motivation oriented towards the other. Simple.
Almost too simple, maybe, but it points towards that outward focus. Then you have D.M. Berger.
Right. He talks about knowing emotionally what someone else is experiencing from their frame of reference, feeling their feelings.
Putting yourself in their shoes, essentially. Yeah. That's a common way to think about it.
And Gene DeCidi adds a crucial bit, feeling something similar, but without getting confused about whose feeling is whose.
Right, maintaining that separation. You feel with them, not as them.
Okay, and Franz de Waal. His definition seems broader.
Yeah, he includes being affected, sharing the emotion, and figuring out the reasons and identifying with them. It's multi-layered.
He even says just being affected by their state, that alone can be a form of empathy.
Which opens it up quite a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Then Nancy Eisenberg focuses on the affective response itself.
So an emotional reaction that comes from understanding someone else's state, and it's similar to what they're feeling.
Or what you'd expect them to feel in that situation. It highlights that emotional resonance.
Alvin Goldman talks about the mental shoes again, understanding their emotions and feelings by putting yourself there.
Very cognitive, that one. Heinz Kahoot is similar thinking and feeling yourself into their inner life.
It's interesting how some focus more on feeling, others more on thinking or understanding.
Definitely. And you see that in different fields, too. Like Harry Prosen talking from a therapist's view.
Yes, that emotional understanding allows a therapist to really connect, which helps the therapy itself.
It builds that alliance, that trust. Carl Rogers, another giant in psychology.
His definition is quite specific, isn't it? Accurately perceiving their internal world, the emotions, the meanings.
As if you were that person. But, and this is key without losing the as if quality.
You remember, it's just like you're them, not actually them. You sense their hurt or pleasure as they do.
Exactly, and understand the causes as they see them. It's deep understanding without merging.
Then Marshall Rosenberg brings in this beautiful idea of understanding the heart, seeing the life energy in someone.
A much more, spiritual take, perhaps, seeing the beauty in them.
And Roy Schaefer is more about the immediate moment, right? Sharing and comprehending their psychological state right now.
Yeah, that momentary connection. When Schwartz flips it slightly, he says, we recognize empathy in others when they accurately get us our values, motivations, skills, and acknowledge them appropriately.
So empathy is also about being seen accurately by others. That's an interesting angle.
Edith Stein goes philosophical. The experience of foreign consciousness in general. Very broad.
Wow, okay. And Simon Baron-Cohen, he kind of brought together two key threads, didn't he?
Yes, back in 2000. He talked about cognitive empathy, the understanding part, perspective taking, and effective empathy, the feeling part, the appropriate emotional response.
Thinking and feeling. That seems like a useful distinction.
It is. And then Ken Lampert in 2005, his description is almost poetic.
Leaving your body, being in their mind, seeing through their eyes, feeling their pain. That's intense.
It really captures that deep, immersive sense of empathy some definitions aim for.
Okay, phew. That's a lot of definitions. So Baron-Cohen mentioned cognitive and affective empathy. Let's dig into those two main types.
Right. The Wikipedia sources really highlight these two. Affective empathy or emotional empathy. That's the one most people probably think of first.
Feeling what they feel.
Pretty much. It's about responding with an appropriate emotion. Often starts with what scientists call emotional contagion.
Like yawning when someone else yawns, but with feelings.
Kind of. You see someone sad, you start to feel a bit sad yourself. It's that shared feeling state.
And within that, there's empathic concern.
Exactly. That's your sympathy, your compassion. You feel for the other person and want to help. It's other-focused.
Okay, but then there's personal distress. How's that different?
Personal distress is when you feel bad, anxious, uncomfortable because they're suffering. The focus shifts back to you.
Ah, so it's less about them and more about your own reaction to their pain.
Right. And there's debate if that's truly empathy. Developmentally, it's interesting. Infants show distress, but toddlers start showing more concern for the other person.
They shift from just being upset by it to wanting to, comfort the other person.
Precisely. And effective mentalizing is also part of this emotional side.
What's that?
It's using all the clues, body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, plus what you know about them in the situation to figure out their emotional state. Reading the room, but for feelings.
Got it. So that's the feeling side. What about cognitive empathy?
Cognitive empathy is the understanding side. It's the ability to grasp another person's perspective, their mental state.
Theory of mind, perspective taking, mentalizing those terms relate to this.
Yes, they're all in the same ballpark. It's about understanding what's going on in someone else's head, thinking about their thoughts and feelings.
And wasn't there something about how good we think we are at this versus how good we actually are?
Yes. That 2019 meta-analysis found basically no link between people's self-reported cognitive empathy and how they actually did on tasks measuring it.
So we might think we're great perspective takers, but maybe not always.
Maybe not. It's tricky to assess accurately yourself. Cognitive empathy also includes perspective taking, just naturally trying to see things from their view.
And fantasy, like with fictional characters.
Yeah, identifying with characters in books or movies, understanding their feelings and motives, that uses cognitive empathy.
Okay, then there's tactical or strategic empathy. That sounds a bit calculating.
It can be. It's deliberately using perspective taking to achieve a certain goal. It might be for good reasons, like negotiation, or potentially manipulative ones.
Right. It highlights that empathy itself isn't inherently good or bad, it's how it's used.
Exactly. And finally, emotion regulation is crucial here too.
How does that fit in?
You need to be able to manage your own emotional reaction, especially that initial emotional contagion, so you don't get overwhelmed. If you're drowning in their feelings, you can't effectively understand or help them.
So you need to regulate your affective empathy to allow your cognitive empathy to work properly, maybe.
That's a great way to put it. Finding that balance is key.
So how do we actually develop this ability? It's clearly not something we're just born with fully formed.
No, definitely not. It unfolds over time. You see early signs, though. By age 2, kids often show emotional responses that match others' feelings.
Like crying when another kid cries.
Sometimes, yeah. Or showing concern. And even earlier, around 1 year, infants seem to get that other people have goals just like they do.
That's pretty amazing for a baby. And toddlers start trying to comfort people.
They do, offering a toy or a hug. And around age 2, they start with pretend play, maybe even telling fibs.
Which means they have to understand that someone else might believe something different from reality.
Exactly. That's the beginning of understanding different minds, different beliefs. It's a precursor to what psychologists call theory of mind.
Which is that full understanding that others have their own separate thoughts, feelings, beliefs.
Right. And that usually develops more fully around age 4. There's the famous Sally Ann test for that.
Yeah, where Sally puts her marble and moves it, and you ask where Sally will look for it.
Precisely. If the child understands Sally has a false belief, they pass. It's a marker for theory of mind development. Though, how this applies in autism is still a topic of much discussion and some controversy.
It seems like how we're raised must play a huge role, too.
Oh, absolutely. Parental empathy, especially from mothers, seems really important for a child's development. And responsive parenting, tuning into the child's needs, seems to mediate that.
But society can also kind of dampen empathy.
Unfortunately, yes. Social biases, cultural norms, they can make it harder for us to feel empathy for people we see as different or part of an out-group.
But it's not fixed, right? You mentioned empathy can be learned.
Yes. That's the encouraging part. There's good evidence suggesting empathy is a skill. It can be improved with training and practice.
So we're not just stuck with whatever level we have now. We can work on it.
Definitely.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. Is empathy just a human thing? What about animals?
Oh, fascinating question. We definitely see empathy-like behaviors in other species. Primates, especially bonobos, are famous for it.
And I read something about rodents.
Yeah.
Rats.
Yeah, studies showed rats would help attract cage mate, even choosing that over getting a treat sometimes. But interestingly, they didn't show the same concern for unfamiliar rats.
So maybe an in-group bias even there? What about dogs? They seem empathetic.
They certainly seem to respond to human distress, don't they? Nuzzling, whining. The question is whether it's true empathy or very well-learned behavior from thousands of years of domestication.
Hard to know for sure, I guess.
It is. Though they do sometimes respond to strangers' distress, too, which complicates the just-learned idea. We also see consolation in chimps comforting someone after a fight.
Who do they usually comfort?
Often kin, family members. And females tend to do more comforting unless it's directed towards high-ranking males.
So there seem to be complex social rules around it, even in chimps. What about the evolutionary basis? Why did this capacity evolve?
Well, one idea, the perception action mechanism from Preston and DeWall, suggests it's built on a very basic system. Seeing an action or emotion in another triggers similar circuits in your own brain.
Like mirror neurons.
Related to that, yes. Jean DeCity argues empathy has deep evolutionary roots tied to communicating emotions, social bonding, parental care, things essential for survival in social species.
And the brain regions involved are pretty old, evolutionarily speaking.
Harry. Brainstem, amygdala, hypothalamus, insula, orbitofrontal cortex. These are ancient structures involved in emotion and basic survival.
And we tend to feel more empathy for animals closer to us, evolutionarily.
Generally, yes. Humans often show stronger empathic responses towards mammals, for instance, than towards insects. Phylogeny seems to play a role.
Okay, last bit on biology. What about genetics? Are some people just born more empathetic?
There's definitely evidence for a genetic influence. Researchers have linked specific gene variations to differences in empathy.
Like which ones?
Well, there's a variant in ADRE2B linked to amygdala activity when seeing emotional stuff. The 5-HTTL-PR gene affects sensitivity to negative emotions. Certain versions of the OXTR gene related to oxytocin are linked to better social skills. And another gene near LRN1 seems involved in reading emotions.
So there's complex genes, environment, development, all interacting.
Exactly. Nature and nurture, as usual.
Now, we usually think of empathy as purely good. But you mentioned earlier it can be challenging, like a double-edged sword.
It can be, yes. While the benefits are huge, better relationships, social skills, cooperation, even better outcomes in medicine and business.
Wait, better business outcomes? How so?
Empathetic leaders tend to have higher morale, engagement, productivity on their teams, and some studies suggest empathetic organizations actually outperform competitors financially.
Interesting. And in medicine?
Oh, huge impact. Empathic care improves patient satisfaction, they're more likely to follow treatment, they actually have better outcomes, fewer errors, fewer lawsuits, and doctors themselves feel less burnt out.
Okay, those are significant benefits. But the downsides?
The big one is empathy fatigue or burnout, especially for people constantly exposed to others suffering, healthcare workers, therapists, caregivers.
Doing too much, basically.
Right. It can lead to exhaustion, guilt, anxiety, depression. Tanya Singer actually advises focusing more on compassion, the desire to help, rather than just sharing the suffering and maintaining some objectivity.
And Paul Bloom noted that super empathetic nurses might actually withdraw a bit to protect themselves.
Yes, potentially spending less time with patients to avoid being overwhelmed by negative emotions. It's a paradox.
And then there's the issue of accuracy and bias.
Definitely. It's often harder to empathize with people who are different from us, different status, culture, beliefs. That in-group bias seems partly evolutionary.
So our empathy isn't always applied evenly or accurately.
No. And in conflicts, while empathy can help bridge divides, those initial biases can get in the way of truly understanding the other side's perspective.
Despite the challenges, empathy is being applied everywhere, isn't it?
It really is. In philosophy, Michael Sloat grounds his whole ethical theory in empathy, arguing our moral motivation comes from feeling with others.
So empathy stops us being heartless, basically.
That's the idea. And in business, beyond leadership, they use it for design.
Like understanding the customer.
Exactly. Patricia Moore dressing as an elderly woman, Ford using those prosthetic suits, Fidelity using VR for customer service training. It's all about experiencing the user's perspective.
And education. You mentioned Carl Rogers.
Right. His person-centered approach relies heavily on teacher empathy, though developing it in trainees can be tough, and some worry the hidden curriculum in medicine might even reduce it. But teaching others seems to boost it.
What about across cultures?
Crucial for intercultural communication. It's learnable, but harder when people are very different, and in conflict resolution.
It's about finding common ground, right? Listening.
Yes. Recognizing shared humanity, understanding needs, interests, perceptions, not just positions. Active listening, reflecting feelings, showing you understand even if you don't agree.
And of course, fiction loves the idea of empaths.
Oh, yeah. Superheroes who feel everything. It taps into that fascination with connection.
Okay, let's tackle some common myths. I hear people say empathy means being weak or soft.
Yeah, that's a big one. But understanding someone isn't weak, it's insightful. It's a strength, not a liability.
Myth 2. You have to agree with someone to empathize.
Definitely not true. You can understand why someone feels or thinks a certain way without endorsing it or saying it's okay. Understanding is an agreement.
Myth 3. Only emotional people are empathetic.
Nope. Remember, cognitive empathy, understanding intellectually, is just as valid and powerful. You don't have to be weeping to be empathetic.
Myth 4. Empathy is draining. It just sucks your energy.
It can be, if you don't have boundaries. But sustainable empathy involves managing your own responses, knowing your limits. It doesn't have to deplete you.
And the last one, empathy can't be taught.
We already busted that one. It's a skill. Like any skill, it can be learned, practiced, and improved.
Good to know. Let's quickly touch on the brain again. What parts are lighting up?
When we feel pain or see someone else in pain, this pain matrix activates, though usually less intensely, when just observing. Key players are the brainstem, amygdala, insula, orbitofrontal cortex, those core emotional and social regions.
And compassion uses slightly different circuits.
Seems so. Compassion adds the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, an area involved in value-based decision-making and positive feelings. There's also this idea that social cognition and physical or analytical thinking might inhibit each other sometimes in the brain.
Like you can't fully empathize and analyze simultaneously.
Potentially, yeah. A kind of neural seesaw.
What about when empathy is impaired? What conditions are associated with that?
Well, autism spectrum disorders are often discussed in relation to empathy. But it's complex. There's the double empathy problem idea.
Which suggests it's a two-way street. A lack of mutual understanding between autistic and non-autistic people.
Exactly. Not just a deficit in one group. Research also looks at mirror neurons and autistic traits. Psychopathy is another condition characterized by low empathy.
But low empathy doesn't automatically mean violent, right?
Crucially, no. The correlation between low empathy alone and violence is basically zero. Lack of self-control is a much stronger predictor. Empathy is just one piece of a complex puzzle.
Are there others?
Yes, things like traumatic brain injury can impact emotional empathy. Schizophrenia is also often associated with difficulties and empathic abilities.
Okay, this has been incredibly thorough. Just one last thing. Where did the word empathy come from?
The etymology. It was actually coined in English psychology by E.B. Titchener around 1909.
Oh, relatively recently then.
Yeah, he was translating a German word Einfühlung.
Which means?
Literally feeling into, which is quite descriptive, isn't it? Before that, empathic sometimes popped up, but often just as a mistake for emphatic.
Feeling into. I like that. Okay, so wrapping this all up, empathy is, wow, way more complicated than it first appears.
Definitely. Multiple definitions, affective and cognitive types, complex development involving biology and environment.
Echoes in the animal world. Huge benefits, but also real challenges like fatigue and bias.
And applications everywhere, from ethics to business to conflict resolution, plus the neuroscience in conditions where it's impaired.
It's this fundamental human capacity, but it's messy and nuanced.
That sums it up pretty well.
So here's a final thought for you listening. We know evolution might bias us towards our own groups, and it takes real effort to bridge big differences in perspective. How can we, consciously cultivate a wider empathy? In our daily lives, what small steps can we take to move past just understanding someone different, to actually connecting with their experience, feeling that compassion, even when it's hard? Something to chew on.
A really important question for today's world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.